Hello everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel. I'm Tanay from Junior Programmer, and today the project that I'm bringing you is the space shooter game, that too in Python with a very simple implementation. So before starting the video, I will tell you that there are intervals in the video, so you can navigate to the video wherever you want, and also I will provide the link to the source code of this Python project so you can create the project just as mine.
Like a Hellcat.
So let's move on. So first of all, let's open the file in IDE. You can use any IDE. I'm using the Microsoft Visual Studio. So let's just open the file here. Okay. So in this video, we have just used one main package, that is the Pygame package in Python. Other than that, we have OS, time, random. So basically the main package that we are using is the Pygame package. Okay, so moving on. First of all, what I have done is that initialize Pygame so that all of these functions can start. I've taken two variables, height and width, and these will be used to make a window or the window of the game where the game can be seen. So moving on, after that, here I've set the display and changed the caption, that is what will appear on the window. So now I will load some images that I will be using. So I'll use images to represent the enemy spaceship and the user spaceship. So I've already have some images in the same directory in the assets folder. So just using the Python modules, as you can see in this line, in the assets folder I have an image called pixel shaped small.png. So similarly, I have opened these three images for the enemy spaceship, red, green and blue color, and the yellow colored spaceship for the user. And similarly for the space, as I've done with the spaceships, I've also done the same with the lasers, different colored lasers. For them I'm using different colors images. Okay, so after that, what I have done here in this line of code is that I have created a background. But from the background, I mean the background of the game, what will appear. So I have simply used a black image that was just black and used it as a background. Okay, moving on. The first class for this that I had to create was the laser class. So first of all, as you can see, I have just used the constructor to initialize some things, set the value of the variables from the parameters. After that, I have defined a function, a method called draw. Now this will be simply used to draw the laser. So as you can see, window.blit, the blit function from the Pygame is simply used to draw it or overwrite it. The function move, as you can see, I am just moving the y-axis on the y-axis, because in the game the laser will only move in one axis, that is y-axis, from up to down, not from left to right. So that is why I've just used this one. Moving on, there's another method called offScreen. In this method, what I have done is that we have just checked if the laser is off the screen or not. So we are just checking the position of the laser with the height of the window and if it's off screen or not, and then the collision is used to check if it has collided with another object. This will be used to check if it has collided with the player object and then deteriorate the health of the player. Moving on, another class that I've created is the ship class. Now for this class, this will be basically used for all the ships, the enemies one and the player one. So for the ship class, first of all, I've used a constructor to initialize some variables. As you can see, the one method that I have used here is the draw method. Now, as the name suggests, this method will be simply used to draw the ships on the screen. So for that, I'm using the blit function again, and for the lasers in this for loop, I'm simply using this to draw the lasers. Whatever the number of lasers are there present at the moment will be drawn. Now another method is the move lasers method. Now from the name, as we can see that this method will be used to move the lasers. So first of all, we have used the loops to check how many lasers are there, and then simply use the simply use it so we can move the laser. Now I have also used some if statements. If the laser is off screen, then we can simply remove the laser, or if it collides with another object, then we have to deteriorate the health of that object. And after that, when it collides, it has to be removed, so it is removed. Now moving on, another method is the cooldown method. Now the purpose of this method is to allow the user to have some time between when he can fire his lasers. So let's say he cannot fire his lasers continuously. If he fires his laser one time, then the next has to be after some time, let's say 30 seconds. So this function makes sure that there is enough time, and it just doesn't allow the user to constantly keep on firing lasers. So it is attained using the if-else statement, using simple conditions. The another method is the shoot method. Now what this method will do is that it will check if first of all it will check if it is cooled down, which means it is able to fire, the user is able to fire, or the ships are able to fire, the enemy ships. Then simply we can draw the lasers, and then we append it to a laser array from which we can then later draw it on the screen. Then I have defined two methods, get width and get height. This will simply get the width and height of the images. Moving on, we have another class called player, which inherits the ship class, which means that all of the functions within the ship class that I just told you will be inherited by this player class, which is a child of the ship. So first of all, as you can see, using the constructor, I have just initialized some variables in this class. Moving on, we have a method called move lasers. So this method will be used to move the lasers. So again, using the loops, what we are doing is that we are making sure that the laser moves, and if it is off screen or not, and if it is off screen, then we have to simply remove the laser, and if it collides with another object, then we have to remove that object or remove the laser and change the health of that object accordingly. Then we have another function, the draw function here, which will be simply used to draw all the contents on the screen, and here I have also used it to draw a health bar that will be used to show the health to the user of his ship. Now this is how I'll show the health using this method, health bar. Here what I have done is that using the draw rectangle function in the Pygame package, I have drawn two rectangles. Both of one is a bit larger and another will keep on changing depending on the health. Both of them will have different colors, so as they both are overlapping, and as the health changes, the length of one rectangle will change according to the health, and it will appear that it is getting destroyed and its health is reduced. Okay, now there's another class, enemy. This will be used to represent the enemy ships, and it is a child of the ship class that I explained before. So here's just an array that I'll be using afterwards. Again, first of all, using the constructor, I have just initialized some variables. After that, I have defined a method called move. Now these ships will only move from up to down. So again, I'm only changing the y position of these ships using a variable called vel, which we can say velocity, which will define the speed from which it is moving. Then another method, shoot method. This shoot method will be used to shoot the lasers from the enemy ships. Again, we first will check down if it is cooled down or not. Then we can generate the lasers and simply append it into an array which we'll use later to display the lasers on the screen. And so now all the main classes have been done. There are some functions that need to be defined. So the first function that I defined is the collide function. Now from the name, as we can see, we have to check if any two objects collide or not, and then we have to perform a function. So here it takes two arguments. This function takes two arguments, both of them objects. Then we see their offsets, in which we just see their position by some simple mathematical equations, and we see if they overlap or not. and if they overlap, this function returns true, and if they're not, it will simply return false. Now we would use this function later to check if two objects collide or not. Now moving on, the function that I've defined, I'm calling it the main function because it will have all the functionality and so on. So first of all, I've defined just some basic things such as the FPS, frames per second, levels. The game goes from level 0 to level 5. Then I've just initialized some fonts. I'm using the Comic Sans of 50, size 50, and for the lost, when it shows that you've lost, the size 60. Just some basic stuff. So moving on, I'm just defining some variables. One of them is an array, wavelength, enemy value, player value, and so on that will be very useful in the code later on. So first of all, I've just made an object of the class player that I used before. Now we will just start the time using the time module, so we can keep track of the cooldown, because we have to cool down after a certain time. So that is why we're using the time module. Now another function that I've defined is the redraw function. Now, as from the name it suggests that after every function or anything is performed within the screen, we have to redraw the whole window so the changes can be seen on the screen easily. So the blend function is simply used to draw it. Then the lives labels, the labels of the lives remaining again. Then here using the for loop, we are simply drawing the enemies, the number of enemies there are, and then we'll draw the player. We have to draw the player each and every time. After that, we are seeing if the player has lost or not, and if he has lost, we'll simply just change the screen using this split function and tell the person that they have lost. And after that, do not forget to update the display, because all of the changes need to be updated afterwards, after each iteration. So now this is we can say the main loop in which the game will run. So first of all, the clock starts and then we redraw the window. So as you can see, I'm using the redraw window in which everything gets redrawn in the loop, so that after each iteration everything gets redrawn. First of all, we'll see if the lives, if the player has enough lives and enough health or not, so he can continue the game. And then we see that if the player has lost or not, so we can show the lost screen if he is lost. Now we have to draw the enemies. So here we are simply checking if there are any enemies, initialized or not. So if they are not, we'll just make some enemies. And this also goes like if the player has destroyed all the enemies at a particular level, then one level will be increased, and for that we have used in this line, this piece of code. So just this statement is used to draw the enemies and so on. As you can see here, I've just made an object of the enemy class and then appended it so all the enemies can be drawn. So after that, for event in pygame.event.get, this is the pygame method, the built-in method. So we're just checking this, if the player has quit the game, then we'll just quit the game so he can exit. Now we'll also need to keep a track of which keys he is pressing, so that we can move, the player can move his spaceship. So using this for if statements, we are simply checking if he has tried to moving to the left, to the right, up and down, and we're simply making changes to the positions in X and Y according to what he has pressed. The arrow keys will be used for navigation. The left for the left arrow key, right for right arrow key, down for the down arrow key, up for the up arrow key. So again, we are using a loop to see where the enemies are and then draw them. Again, using a random function so that the enemy can shoot at a random time. After he shoots, we have to check if it is colliding with if the enemy and the player are colliding, not the lasers but the enemy and the player. So if they collide, then the health of the player reduces by 10 and we simply remove the enemy. If not, then if the enemy does not collide, then the enemy moves out of the screen and we have to make it disappear, so we simply remove it. Now after that, all the functions and all the classes have been defined. I've just used another method called main menu, which will serve as a menu and will start the game. So simply a title font, using this variable to make a font that will be appear on the main screen, on the start screen. So here I've used a loop so that we can keep on in the game. So first of all, we'll press the mouse to begin. This will appear, and then we'll update the display. We have to keep in mind that we have to update the display after we are performing any function so that we can see it on the screen. Now if the in the for loop we are checking that if the person has you tried to quit the game, then we'll simply quit it, and if he has pressed the game, the mouse button this pygame.mouse button can be used that if the mouse button has been pressed. So if the mouse button has been pressed, then we move on to the main function, which I've just defined previously, where all the functionality of the game is being written. So that is how you can make a simple game. And sorry, I missed it. And at the end we have just used we just need to call this main menu from in the Python so that everything can be started. So guys, that is how you create a simple space shooter game in Python. So let's just see a simple implementation of the game running it. So I'll just begin. I press the mouse button and the game will begin. So just pressed it. So as you can see, the spaceship of the player of my spaceship appears. There are also some enemy spaceships. They're firing lasers, as you can see. When I hit the enemy, you can see the health of me deteriorating. Similarly for the spaceships, when I shoot them, you can see them finishing, or you can see them vanishing off the screen. As you can see, just now I've done this. So the level has also increased because I just finished all the spaceships and so on. And you can see the difficulty has increased a bit because more number of spaceships were appeared, and you can see the lost. I hope you liked this video, and please give it a like, and if you are new to my channel and you haven't subscribed it yet, please subscribe my channel so I can keep on bringing exciting stuff to you. Thank you.